Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for episode 22 of the Road Monkey podcast. My name is Kevin Pickard, and I'm here to share stories of success, creativity, overcoming adversity, and ultimately I want to inspire our listeners to challenge themselves and take action in their lives. This week we are speaking to Performance and Technical Manager for Basketball England, Mr. Steve Bucknall. A trailblazer in his own right, in his playing years he became one of the few British players to make it to the elusive NBA, as well as being a college teammate for the legend Michael Jordan. He went on to play for the LA Lakers alongside Magic Johnson, and in our discussion today reflects on his journey and lessons learned as he now gives back to the next generation of aspiring basketball players. Just before we get started, again a quick reminder that we're in the process of putting together a special episode that will go out before Christmas and feature you, the listeners. So this is really a shout out to get in touch. If you're happy to join us, share some thoughts on the show, your learnings and what's really resonated with you, please get in touch through any of our platforms. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube or email, all of which you can find on our website www.theroadmonkey.org. So here we go with episode 22. From London to the NBA, round the world and back. A discussion with Basketball England's Performance and Technical Manager, Steve Bucknall. Hello and welcome to the show, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Wish we had better weather, but all in all, I'm in good health, good spirits. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're going to obviously explore your journey today. You talked about the weather there, and obviously your journey's taken you all around the world. So there's probably been plenty of places you've been where it's a lot better right now, but we're in England and we'll take what we can get.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, what I'd like to do just to get obviously our listeners understanding a little bit of your background and kind of your journey so far, if you could just give us a quick kind of oversight as to who are you and what your sporting journeys look like so far.
Well, my name's Stephen Bucknall. I'm an ex-professional basketball player who grew up in London and went to, seek my fortune in America when I was 14, 15 years old. Went through the school system, high school system in Boston at Governor's Academy. Then went on to play for North Carolina under the legendary coach Dean Smith, and then had a stint with the Lakers in the early 90s with Magic Johnson and James Worthy and some of those top players, and then really forged a career in Europe for 16 years playing in Germany, France, London, and Greece. So currently I am the performance manager for Basketball England, and I also run my own club, London Thunder Basketball Club.
So that's a very diverse journey, and we'll obviously unpick that a little bit as we go through today. I'm just curious as to where it all started for you, because obviously you mentioned in London. If you just want to flesh that out a little bit, what did kind of your childhood look like from a sporting perspective? What was it like growing up there, and kind of what opportunities did you have that ended up taking you to the States?
Well, I grew up in South London, in Streatham, with my parents from the West Indies. I went to a Tulse Hill school, grammar school, in a tough part of the neighborhood. I went through there, and I used to hang around with my buddies, and we were a very sporting group. All of us played sports, and we were thrilled by playing sports, and not like today. We played it every break time, every lunchtime. We was out there kicking the basketball, and I tried my hand at football, cricket, rugby, tennis, but nothing quite felt right. I won't say it quite felt right. I didn't feel like I was the best, and I always wanted to be the best. We were very competitive, our friends, and each one of them had a sport that they were good at. And, I tried. I was decent at it, but I wasn't the best. And one day, one of my friends said, I think it was lunchtime, really, lunch break, said, come in and play basketball. I've heard of basketball, but, netball, basketball was all the same to me at that point. didn't really know the difference. But anyway, he brought me into the gym, and he was a lot smaller than me. And I remember for about 30 minutes, he just ran rings around me. He just ran rings around me, dribbling. He could really dribble back then compared to what I could. And obviously, I was taught to get rebounds, but he just thrashed me. And then, I took it personally. I took it personally, and from that day, after school, I would go to the gym and ask the PE teacher, Mr. Robinson, for a basketball, and he was happy to give me. And he was like, "Oh, you want to play basketball?" And he told me his story about how he used to play basketball with Paul Phillips from Crystal Palace. And I'm like, "Yeah, just give me the ball. You know what I mean? When you're young, just give me the ball." And I just go in the gym and play. And I played for about 2 weeks, and then I called my friend back one lunchtime, and I said, "Come, let's have another game." And then, funny as it is, yeah, I beat him. I beat him after I realized what advantages I had with the height and how I could manipulate the ball a lot better. And it really went from there. I think the PE teacher, Miss Robinson, must have saw that at the same time. He must have came in and watched a little bit, and then, from that day on, as soon as school was over, he was running after me in the playground to come to the gym and play basketball, and it really started from there. And he took me to Crystal Palace to watch Alton Bird and Crystal Palace play. I remember Bob Roma, Dan Lloyd, Pete Jeremich. Still remember their names. Paul Simpson, an all-time great English player, point guard. And when I saw that game, I really fell in love with the sport, to be fair. I really was at Crystal Palace. I fell in love with the sport. I realized that this is something more than just a fad, more than just dabbling. This is something that I wanted to do. And I think, accompanying that, he took us to watch the Harlem Globetrotters play at Wembley. And that really showed me the kind of showmanship side of the game and the fancy things you can do with the ball and the entertainment side. And from that point, I'm like, how do I get there? How do I get to that level? What do I need to do? And I pretty much just followed my dream from there. I mean, I ended up playing for a local club team, which my coach, PE teacher, took me down. And then from there, I was scouted to go to one of the best clubs in the country at the time, Crystal Palace. A great, rich tradition of developing international players and winning club championships. And I got an opportunity to play for their junior team. And that's really where it started for me. And then I came across Roy Packham, a legendary youth coach who won multiple titles at youth level and developed 20, 30 plus internationals. And our paths crossed. And he was really the one who gave me the opportunity to go to the States. So that's a little bit of the history of how I started to play basketball, Kevin.
Oh, that's incredible. How old were you when that first basketball got picked up and you kind of decided you were needed to get better just so you could give your mate a good kicking?
14, I think, late 13, 14. We had 7 or 6 PE halls at Tulse Hill, and so he was always available to get in there, and he took me in there, and like I said, he whooped me. I thought it was quite amazing at the time the way he could dribble. But yeah, I've never really played the sport before, maybe dabbled in it. But like I said, back then, netball, basketball was kind of all the same. So I didn't really understand the game. And then, yeah, I put my efforts into beating Michael, his name, Michael. Saw him a few years ago. And he still claims that he's the one that started me playing basketball, and I couldn't really argue with him. It was at school reunion. I remember that. If it wasn't because of me, you wouldn't have played basketball. I was like, you're right. Bought him a beer. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's really, really cool. You talked obviously about going over to the States through kind of the latter part of your educational journey. Was there Because obviously you mentioned there in the intro that you kind of bounced around a number of countries. Were there any particular experiences across those various countries outside of the UK? Because obviously playing in so many different countries, there's I guess very few sports people who are immersed in club systems in many different parts of the world. And obviously from a sport, that's effectively the same rules. Did you find like in different countries it was so different, or was it more just the cultural side of being in different places?
I think all of that, but going from country to country, the one thing it did give me, I could reflect on the way they were developing their younger players and what they were doing with their youth setups. And I don't know why I paid attention to it, but I did. I mean, a lot of the time, the government was fully behind the teams, the local government, and they usually provided the facilities and support of the team. And each professional team, you know, had a youth program, and the youth program was all about the community local, but it was all about developing players for the men's teams. And that's what I noticed is that each team, each country I went to, they had a group of young players who've come through the system, and the fans would really get behind them in the games. And particularly when I was in Greece, I played with Diamandidis, famous players who went on to play for Panathinaikos, a huge club program, and went on to play for the Greek national teams. And our stadiums were sold out. We used to get 5,000 people, and most of the time it was to see these young fledgling players who have come through the youth setup and made the men's team, and they really had the full support of the coaches, the fans, and really didn't see that in England so much, but in France it was the same. In every country I went to, everything was built like a pyramid from the bottom up. And obviously they brought in their foreign players, wherever else, but it was built around local players who grew up in the vicinity and went through the program and were the stalwart of their teams. There were players on the teams like, yeah, I played there when I was 16 and 17, and now I'm the captain. So I took note of that. I took note how they blended the youth into the men's programs, and how they structured their teams. And I think I paid attention to that because probably I had in my mind of how I could give something back to British basketball. I think because I always felt that we were the underdogs, we were underrated as a nation in basketball. And I really, without knowing, wanted to know why. What are they doing so special that we're not? And over the years, I built up my own philosophy and rationale to why this might be the case. So it was a great experience going from country to country. And besides culturally and the language, basketball is pretty common. What you have to do to be successful, and for some reason we weren't doing it. So yeah, it was a good time for me. Besides, getting involved with different cultures and eating different foods, and sometimes even learning the language. It was just to understand that it doesn't matter where you go in Europe, they're kind of doing the same thing in terms of developing their basketball players.
That's a really, really interesting way of looking at it. I think perhaps if we jump outside of basketball and talk about something like football in a country like Brazil, where you get a lot of people who kind of come through their local club systems that maybe play on the beaches and in the favelas and stuff like that, and actually they go on to become cult heroes, and actually the whole country gets behind them, and people say we can never understand why Brazil are so passionate about football, and then actually read the stories behind a lot of their players and their journeys to get where they've got to through their local areas, and actually it's like they become like the local heroes. And it's
exactly.
No, it's obviously in your role now, I'd imagine that's quite of a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, really prevalent now. We want to create heroes. I mean, I didn't have the heroes that I had when I was growing up. I said was Alton Bird and Bob Rome and the Crystal Palace players, because I saw them play for the first time. We need to develop in basketball our own heroes. We've had some players, Luol Deng, John Amici, Joe Freeland, and others who've had some success, but we've never built given them enough exposure and built our sport around them. and create heroes and create uh, mentors and just have kids wanting to be like them. I think we missed the trick there. I know we're trying to change that, but over the years we failed to build up characters, and characters sometimes propel sports and bring in sponsorships, and I think we just haven't caught hold of that as we should have, because probably the lack of exposure on TV and the lack of awareness of the sport. So we've got to continue to improve in these areas, I think, to get where we need to be.
That's brilliant. I think one of the things that I guess I'm a little bit curious about, having somebody who's gone through from a basketball perspective, kind of the biggest platform in globally, going through the college system and having kind of first-hand experience of that. One, what were kind of the lessons I guess you picked up on that journey, but also what has stuck with you from that you could hopefully bring back into the system now in this country?
I mean, the college system, I went to a special school, let's be fair. I went to the University of North Carolina, one of the biggest basketball schools and probably one of the richest traditions in the game. So as soon as I went there, I knew that the aspirations aspirations were at the top level. If you didn't win a national championship, you really didn't you didn't really count in the scheme of things at that school. But the coach, the coach Dean Smith, it was all about family. It was all about the team. It was all about succeeding together. He didn't put the individual above the team. I'm sure if you saw The Last Dance, Michael Jordan pretty much said the same thing. It was about the team. It was always about the team with Coach Smith, and he wanted to do things the right way. One of the biggest lessons I learned in college, you have to go to class. I mean, not many programs will tell you that, but we had to go to class, and if we didn't go to class, we wouldn't play. And Coach instilled that in us, that basketball scholarship doesn't mean you just play basketball. It means you have to develop yourself as a human being and get ready for that next journey after sport. And he really talked about that a lot, the next journey after you finish college. What do you want to do? Because he made it quite clear not everybody's going to be able to play in the NBA or play for money. And he was always trying to develop individuals and people and the team concept. And those are the lessons I learned from him. And also some of the friendships, which I still have today, have lasted the test of time. Not just players that played with me on the team, but classmates. So my college experience was definitely special for me, and I wouldn't change that for anything.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think there's a lot of sports people who can often tell you some of the friends that they've made for life, and I find that now a lot more around my age, with a lot of friends getting married, and you turn up at weddings and they go, "Oh, when did you meet?" And it's kind of like, "Oh, we were in the school sports team together, or we used to go away on camps together, or whatever it was." And actually, they do become friends for life, and something that I don't know about basketball, but certainly in the sports I've been involved in, it's not sold that well. In terms of actually, that's a huge benefit the sport has in terms of friends for life. And we all talk about winning, but actually some of the wins are not sold as well as they could be, I don't think.
No, I agree with you. I mean, there's other things besides sport that helps you to grow as a person, and friendship and building bonds is one of them. And you know, my father always told me that some of the friends you keep are the ones that know you when you kind of had nothing and you were just kind of a nobody, and you were just these guys, they know you from the beginning. So there's no expectations. They just want to be your friend, because they like you as a person, not for any ulterior motive. And sometimes when you're in sports, people tag on to you because they want to get something from you. So, you have to be very careful as a sportsman, as you know, of who you surround yourselves with. And one of the ways to make sure it doesn't hurt you, I think, is to have friends that you've known for years, who know who you are as a person.
That's really, really a great message, I guess, for everyone out there, and certainly for athletes that are aspiring to the highest levels, never forget where you came from and keep those people close to you. And I guess having a college coach with a program that was so built around family and friendship and that sort of thing, that was something that I guess went hand in hand with the sports side of things. So nice. Yeah. Fascinating. I've got to ask the tourist question. Being somebody that went through that program, which for anyone who hasn't watched The Last Dance was also the same program that Michael Jordan came through, you'd have obviously then going into the NBA crossed paths with him. What was it like from an actual athlete's perspective stepping out on the court against him? And then obviously when he came back to college during the off season and stuff like that, what were your experiences around him? Because I think very few people, again, probably have that insight, because I'm sure, like you alluded to on our last point, he probably keeps a tight ring around him.
Yeah, the good thing for me is that I previously knew Michael Jordan, and obviously from the Dean Smith culture, all the North Carolina players in the league knew each other. So I remember we played in Chicago and we went out to warm up, and I saw Michael Jordan, and I was with James Webber. I said, let's go over there and have a quick chat with Mike. And the first thing he said is, you made it then. And I kind of laughed. He was like, you made it then. He maybe didn't think I was going to make it, but anyway. And we still had that Carolina bond even before the game. We knew we were going to compete, but there was still that loyalty to North Carolina. And we had a quick chat, and then we went our separate ways to our ends of the court, and got into our warm-ups and then went into the locker room like you usually do. When the game starts, obviously, it's all about Michael Jordan when you're playing against him. The strategy is how you stop him, and it was the same for the Lakers. It's like, everybody acknowledged that this is the guy. We can slow him down. I don't think everybody ever said you could stop him. If you could slow him down, you might have an opportunity in it. Even in those days, it was all about containing him. And I was just amazed. I've seen some great players. I mean, I've had some good seats on benches over the years to see some of the best players in the game play, and he was one of them. He was just amazing to watch. Such a kind of graceful athlete on the floor, just had everything. And then you combine it with his competitive spirit to win. I mean, he was untouchable. My experience actually going against him is limited at the NBA level, even though I got a few minutes. I think he was probably out the game at that point. But, my experience of going head to head with him would really be at Carolina when he came in the summer. And he used to come into the gym, and everybody's, Mike's in the gym. Everybody acknowledges that. We don't make a big deal about it, because obviously he's not come there for people to applaud him and to be all over. He's come there to work out. So give him the respect of that. He knows other guys, other NBA guys in the gym. I just remember that nobody wanted to guard the guy. I mean, players literally refused to really play defense on him. So I was a freshman. I was sitting there watching because I didn't get in. No one picked me. I was a freshman. And then he just said, "Is there anybody here wants to go at me and give me some, compete against me?" And I guess I was the fool that raised his hand. And kind of from that day, every time he came into the gym, he made sure I was on the opposite end, because I would actually really try to guard him. I don't think I was very successful, but I would really give it everything I had, and he knew that. And maybe you had to, change gears from 2 to 3 to go against me, but I know he appreciated that when after the game, because he would give me his trainers sometimes, and she was like, "Well done, at least you're not backing away and you're competing." So I felt proud about that. The problem is that every other player wanted me to guard him after that to give him a workout. So I was knackered by the 3-hour session, because everybody wanted me to guard him, and I'm like, "Geez, I just finished guarding Jordan. Give me a break. I want to get a couple shots up myself."
I think I'm looping back a little bit to, I guess, where you started, but looking at your story there from school and actually going, got beat, I went back and worked so hard because I wanted to beat him. And actually, although you're coming up against somebody obviously at an insanely high level with Jordan, actually having that kind of mindset of I'm not fussed who's in front of me, I'm going to stick my neck out and give it a go, I think might be, one of the reasons that you're one of the few people from this country who's actually gone out and made a name for themselves in the NBA, because very few people will put their neck out and go way outside of their comfort zone and go, I don't care, I'm going to do it. And was that something that you felt has kind of permeated, obviously, the rest of your career since then?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my father, to my father and my upbringing. My father preached to me that you got to work hard. He said, if you want to do something in life, it doesn't matter what it is, you're gonna have to work hard. And he goes, if you want to be the best, you're gonna have to work like the best. I realized that quickly, that if you don't give the effort, you don't get the reward. So I had that mindset going in. I mean, Crystal Palace had top players better than me, and I wanted to be better than them, so I had to work. Carolina, going into Carolina, I had so many people telling me, don't go to Carolina, they're too good, you're not going to play. I was like, the hell with that. I'm going to work as hard as I can, and I'm going to play. The same with the Lakers. I had opportunities to go to Orlando, who actually offered me a deal, a 1-year deal. And I turned it down because I wanted to go to the Lakers, because basically everybody said I couldn't make it. And I was like, no, I can make it. I've got to work. I remember Pat Riley. I mean, I knew quite clearly why I made the Lakers, because I was the one who wanted to play defense. I was the one who worked the hardest. I was the one who the coach believed could go in the game and guard somebody. And that's what I did. I've always had that attitude that you have to work. I'm not saying you have to be the best. It's nice to be the best, but you know what? There's some people that have to go out there and graft for what they want. And I was one of the ones that always felt, before the skills, before anything, you've got to give the effort and desire. And a lot of the time that has carried me through games.
I think one of the things that I'm quite curious about is, if we take a pinch of salt and take Jordan out of the situation, I guess pre him coming through, there were probably two names in the American system that were, at that point, the leaders from their achievements so far with both Larry and Magic. And then obviously going on to the Lakers, did you feel like at that point, I've arrived, I'm going up against the best? And did you almost feel like, was there a moment when you actually maybe stepped out for the first time on a court with your Lakers top on and went, I've this journey's been worth it, I'm here, let's go out and do this kind of thing?
I always thought about that. I mean, the best, listen, when I was growing up, I loved Magic Johnson. I'm just to be straight, Jordan was there, but Magic Johnson was the one who I thought had everything. He had the razzmatazz. He changed the position of the point guard. He had the showtime. That was the team I followed. And I lived in Boston, so I took a lot of stick for that. Took a lot of stick because everybody was like, well, you're in Boston and you've got Larry Bird, Parrish, and those guys. But so actually going on the court with Magic, it was very difficult for me. It was a lot easier to go on the court and play against Jordan because I had that experience before. But Magic, the first day in camp in Honolulu, went on camp, I could hardly breathe when I went on the court with him because he was my idol. And I remember James Worthy slapping me on the head, in the back of the head. He was like, "Wake up! You need to prove yourself here." Because he knew me from before, and he was like, he didn't see the same person. And I think he realized that maybe I was a little bit shell shocked. But that slap on the back of the head quickly woke me up, and then I was back at work, so to speak, guarding Magic full court and making him work and getting them frustrated. So yeah, it was difficult to see your idols out there and being on the floor. But again, you've realized that, you've worked your butt off. No one's actually giving you this. So enjoy the moment. I don't think I sat there and, patted myself on the back and said, well done. And, it was more continue to work. This is kind of just the beginning. And if you want to be a professional, that is the mindset you have to have. And I think I developed that mindset. Being around those type of guys, I was just watching. I just watched and learned the way they behaved and the way, they conducted themselves and the way they trained. And I thought it was amazing. I mean, I think one of the reasons I credit the Lakers is for, giving me that fortitude and that resilience so I could play till I was 40. Just watching them. And they, at the time they were not at the peak of their game. They were actually going downhill, but the way they worked, Worthy used to get me in the gym and we used to do the Stairmaster for 40 minutes, then we lift weights. And I thought it was incredible. And he said, well, you want to have a long career, this is the type of things you have to do off the court. And they taught me a lot.
You talk a lot about off the court there, and I think that's, you've mentioned mindset and kind of that drive a number of times already, but it's something that I think, especially when I know before we started recording, we were talking about talent development and actually looking for people almost beyond the physical stuff and actually talking about, what's their drive, what's that kind of attitude that they have, and how do you develop that. And I think it's really interesting there that you kind of credit that and go back and say, well, that was kind of where I really honed that, because that was the culture, that was the place I immersed myself in, and that was the norm, if you like everyone there had that. So I think that's really cool how that's kind of had such an influence on you.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I know that I've had some of the greatest coaches, tutoring me and teaching me, and I've also been able to play against some great players. So, you need a little bit of luck, and I guess I've had that, but I've also, as you said, had the right mindset and had the desire to go beyond the norm. I think just leaving England was a tough decision for me as a young kid. That was one of the big decisions I made, leaving my family and my sisters and to go to the unknown. So I've always had the mindset that if you want to be the best, you need to go where the best are, and you need to be challenged. And if you're good enough, you'll get through. If you get a little bit of luck, so be it. And that will help you to reach your goal. So as I said, I've been blessed, so I understand that, and I've had opportunities, because without the opportunities, you could never succeed.
Something I'll have to pick up on, because you mentioned it there about your training camp. When you sit there today and, it's not necessarily the brightest, sunniest day out there, and you talk about how hard it was leaving England, did you get off the plane the first time in Honolulu and think, this isn't bad, I'm okay leaving London for this?
Yeah, going with the Lakers for preseason is not bad at all. We went to a private airport, we got on a private plane, my bags were taken to my room, we stayed in a top hotel. And then you go to practice into a gym, and it's about 100 degrees, and there's 2 fans in the corner. And yeah, besides, looking at the luxury side of things, then you know you're gonna have your work cut out for you when you go to a gym and it's 100+ degrees and there's 2 fans in there, and it's the start of preseason. So, I've enjoyed all that experience, and hopefully I can pass some of this knowledge down to the youngsters, which I've been trying to do. But again, times have changed a little bit.
We'll talk a little bit there about obviously passing things on and the next generation and stuff. Do you think the surge that we've had this summer in following The Last Dance, and obviously some really good press that's kind of come out of that program, and hopefully some follow-up programs to it, do you think that'll have a knock-on effect to the number of youngsters that are like, that actually looks really cool, like you said earlier about the sport not necessarily having as much coverage as it should? So do you think this is maybe a kickstart for it?
No, we hope so. Bringing basketball into the forefront of everybody's minds is good for our sport. But for me, it's what the young people are taking from that Last Dance. There's many things you can take from it, but for me, they need to understand that Michael Jordan kind of dedicated his life to being the best, whether good or bad. But the pure results on the floor were excellent. But it wasn't that he went to, he trained a couple times a week and and he was successful. He actually evolved his game at every stage. He actually put the time in. He actually did things the right way. And a lot of kids I I see today want kind of a quick fix attitude where, you work for a couple hours and you think you should be at the top of your game. Well, Jordan clearly shows me that to be at the top of the game, you got to work at it every single day.
That's a great message for all the youngsters out there. I mean, looking at the state of British basketball right now, and obviously with the role that you've got heavily involved in it, where are we heading? What's it looking like? What's the exciting stuff that you're seeing going on at the moment in the next few years?
Well, I know at Basketball England, we've put in our performance pathway, and I think that's a game changer. We're trying to identify players at an earlier stage. We're trying to bring these players together more often. We're trying to offer these players international competition, which they would never get at that age, and to give them that experience. And I think that can only produce better players in the future, mentally stronger players, being able to adapt. A lot of the times our younger players will not play international basketball until they're 16. That is the first time they experience that. And that's too late. That's way too late. So we've developed a new system where we're getting them in at 14 into our Aspire programs, where we're grouping the better players together, because competition, to excel in competition, you need competition. And a lot of the time, because the players are dispersed across the country, some players do not have that competition. So they live in a false world where they think they're the best, but really they're not. So bringing these kids together early, giving them some good coaching, giving them some good homework, making sure they can go back to where they are and work on things, giving them that knowledge, that experience, that education, we think in the end is going to produce better players in the long run. And I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to see what happens in the next 5 years, because as you know, this is not a quick fix solution. These things, to build a good player, takes 5-10 years. So we won't see the true results of what we started until about 5 years. And we have projected that, we're looking at these younger ones next 5 years taking the sport to the next level at the international level.
Well, it's something I'm sure we'll be following very closely, and hopefully we'll see the fruits of all of this coming to light. One thing, I guess, to pull all of this together, just some reflections from you. You've had such a vast experience in terms of like your travel in both sport and culture, and now looking back reflectively, and especially with the role you've got now, what were kind of the big takeaways? I mean, I know you've already touched on a few in terms of like work ethic and stuff like that, but what's kind of really shaped the way in which you're doing your job now, and which, if you had a group of young athletes that were wide-eyed and said to you at the age of 13, I want to be the next Magic or whoever it is, what do you say to those people?
Well, the first thing I would say is that you've made it so far because you've got something. Now, how do we build on that? For me, is education. People may say, well, what's that got to do with sport? But no, education is important. We want smart players. We want intelligent players. We want players who can actually think the game. So for me, stay in school. Make sure you maintain your grades. And apart from that, you have to have a regime. You have to have a program in place that will support your dreams, which means scheduling, doing things that you don't want to do. This is how you make it. Like, I talk to the kids all the time. It's like, who gets up in the morning and goes running 30-40 minutes? Who does that? Nobody puts their hands out and say, well, you actually should be doing that. Maybe not every day, but every other day you put into your schedule. You have a regime. Who's going to the gym doing weights? Who is working on the physical side of their game? Not many people say anything about that. I said you don't need a weight room. You can do 100 push-ups. You can do sit-ups. You can do plyometric exercises. Who's doing that side? Who's going to the gym, getting in 16 hours of basketball? Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. Well, if you want to make it to the top, this is what it takes. So who's going to make these sacrifices? You have to sacrifice if you want to make it to the top. as you know, and elite athletes know, you have to make sacrifices that not ordinary people will do. Ordinary people not in the sport will not do it. I always believe, maybe I'm old school, I believe you got to suffer to make it. I believe at some point you have to suffer, you have to feel the pain. Who's willing to feel the pain? And also, probably most important thing is you got to surround yourself with good people. Any negative influences, you get rid of them. Surround yourself with the best coaches. And again, with this internet and all the access you have, everything you need to know is online that can help you. Who's using, the internet, the World Wide Web to find out stuff, to investigate, to research players, to look at videos? Who's doing this stuff? If you do this and combine it with everything else, you're going to have a good shot. And that's what I tell them, is that, it's a perfect, I wish I was young again living in this time. I have so many things at my fingertips. I could have been a lot better player. So I try to encourage people to use their own initiative and to follow some of those things I discussed.
That's a really nice message to pull it all together. I think it's really interesting that you talked about there, like the actual need to embrace that pain and suffer through it, because there's a fine line, of course, between suffering in the sense of sport and wider life, as I know is in the media right now. But actually, one of the things I think people shy away from is actually just the physical pain of training. And, whether you're in endurance sport, a speed-based sport, or whatever type of sport you're in, there will come a point where you're going to be uncomfortable. And I think that point you just said there about doing things you don't want to do from a sporting perspective is the facts if you want to make it. So it's really interesting you say that. So no, thank you. It's really interesting, because there's so many things you see when you watch these kind of documentaries and things we've talked about, that actually you get kind of a snippet of it, and you often wonder, well, I wonder what I'd do if I was in the shoes of one of those players on the court. So just to have those insights, it's been really, really fascinating. So thank you so much, Steve.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm always interested in helping people to reach their goals. So, I always tell this story to our youngsters. I always tell them my experience. You can use this to help you. This is what you do. You use my experience to help you to reach your goals. If you do that and you take good experience from other people and you put them all together and you actually reflect on it, you can actually predict your pathway. It may not happen, but you can actually plan your pathway into success. And that's what's needed. You got, as I said, people want quick fix. I'm like, no, you have to plan this thing. It's a 5-10 year journey. Plan it out. You have the ability to do that. And that's what you should be doing. And then if you don't make it, you can't say that you didn't give it your best and you didn't try. And when you reach for the sky and you don't make it, you realize that wherever you are, you're in a good place. And I think people need to remember that it's not all about playing at the elite level. It's that journey. It's that journey that's gonna build you as a human being. And whatever you do in life, you're gonna be successful.
What a wonderful way to round off the show. Steve, thank you. It's been a really fascinating hour. Thank you so much for your time.
No, my pleasure, Kevin.
A huge thank you again to Steve there for sharing some time with us. A few reflections from me picking up on Steve's words. You've got this far already, how do we build on that? Perhaps we're all running so fast to whatever our goal is, we don't take time to acknowledge our progress and the work that's got us to that point. Another big takeaway for me was, do you actually have a plan that supports whatever goal you are chasing? If you cast your mind back to episode 1 of our podcast with My Swim Pro founder Ferez and his clear message, hope is not a plan. I found it fascinating as the conversation came to a close. Steve said, to make it to the top, you have to make sacrifices that ordinary people are not prepared to do. And let's be clear, not everyone aspires to be an NBA player or an Olympic champion or compete for their country, but most people do like to move forwards in some way. Growth comes from putting yourself in that uncomfortable zone, stepping outside of that circle of safety and embracing the challenges that come with that, especially this need for patience. Everything we need to be successful is at our fingertips in this digital world. whether that's finding inspiring people to listen to, books from people we want to emulate, or simply making small life changes that will bring you happiness. I'm getting a bit philosophical there, but perhaps that's a theme that's coming out across our Season 3 as our guests share their stories. Certainly lots of life hacks for our listeners. So on to next week, and we've got a curveball for Season 3 as we head behind bars. We are speaking to an inspiring professor who has researched and implemented some incredible schemes to help people who have become sucked into the UK justice system, with the aim of helping them find their path in the world using the power of sport. We look forward to sharing this discussion with you, but until then, thanks for listening. Give us a quick like if you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends, and have a great week.